Hello everyone! As we are closing out the second year in the clown decade, we of course have some clowning to go through. This time in particular, I do want to bully women in power, because quite frankly it's been an absolute nightmare for gender equality up in the higher ranks of parliaments around the world. For example, about 2 weeks ago now, Sweden's first female Prime Minister resigns hours after appointment, reminding me of times when I've asked my girlfriend where she wants to eat. So let's find out what really happened. So, Magdalena Andersson was announced as leader on Wednesday but resigned after her coalition partner quit the government and her budget failed to pass. Instead, Parliament voted for a budget drawn up by the opposition, which included the anti-immigrant far right. You had to throw that in BBC, didn't you? The far right are the bad guys, they're anti-immigrant. Ooh. I have told the Speaker that I wish to resign, Ms Anderson told reporters. Her coalition partner, the Green Party, said it could not accept a budget drafted for the first time with the far right. I'm sorry, I don't trust Greens or the BBC to accurately describe what the far right are, because the far right to, especially the Greens, just means anyone to the right of Mao. Ms Anderson said that she hoped to try and become Prime Minister again as a single-party government leader. There is a constitutional practice that a coalition government should resign when one party quits, the Social Democrats said on Wednesday. I don't want to lead a government whose legitimacy will be questioned. The Speaker of Parliament said he would contact party leaders on the next move. So yes, it's not that she realised within the first few hours that she couldn't handle the pressure. It was just a genuine political battle, and in the end she said, well, there's reason for this to not be a legitimate government with me as its leader, so I'm going to resign and try and sort it out. And sort it out she did, because 5 days later, Sweden's first female Prime Minister returns after resignation, and she was officially voted in as a single government party. So that's probably the least nightmarish out of all the stories I'm going through today. Because the next nightmare we have is from Sanna Marin, Finland's Prime Minister, and she was sorry for clubbing after a COVID contact. Because when girls get it done, they deserve to go clubbing till 4 AM. I really do hate modern politics. So, Sanna Marin went on a night out in Helsinki on Saturday, hours after a foreign minister had tested positive for COVID. She was initially told that she did not need to isolate because she had been fully vaccinated, but later missed a text that had advised her to isolate. Critics questioned her judgment for not isolating until testing negative. The Social Democratic Prime Minister, 36, said the text message that advised her to avoid social contact was sent to her work phone, which she had left at home. Silly girl. And I get that politicians and things like that are people too. And we can make mistakes and hey, we all want a good time. But really, being a Prime Minister especially is a high stress and high work time job. Plus, I'm pretty sure she has a newborn baby, so I don't understand where she found the time to even go out clubbing till 4 AM. Because doing that pretty much takes out 2 days, and if it's over a weekend, where's she going to fit in the family time? I mean, I had a bad enough time recovering from nights out when I was 21. I can't imagine what she's like at 36. Just questioning the judgment of the Finnish Prime Minister, that's all. So, when she saw the text on Sunday, she urgently sought a COVID test, and the result came back negative. At first, Ms Marin defended her actions, arguing that she had followed the advice of her Secretary of State who informed her about the COVID exposure. But in a Facebook post on Monday, Ms Marin said that she should have double-checked the guidance and used better judgment. I am very sorry for not understanding that I needed to do that, she wrote. Which there just seems to be a trend these days of people in power, and prime ministers especially, locking down entire countries and giving out advice that they themselves don't seem to manage to follow. How do you misunderstand your own government legislation and advice? Because Finland's guidance, I think, is that if you are double vaccinated, you don't need to isolate if you have been in contact with someone with a positive case. However, they advise you do, but you get a test that comes back negative before you should feel safe to go out. That's their advice. She should know that as the Prime Minister, and she basically completely ignored it. While out clubbing till 4 AM. I mean, I don't mind her going out and having a good time. What's weird to me is that it was out till 4 AM and she's got a relatively young family. I just don't understand where that time comes from. But I suppose there's a reason that some of the women higher up in Finnish politics are known as the Finnish Spice Girls. According to Edward Dutton anyway. I just don't see how people like that can be taken seriously. But on another note with the Finnish Prime Minister, someone from Finland was tweeting about this, And he referred to her as the Instagram cat girl prime minister. And someone asked, wait, is she really a cat girl? And he just replied saying, yeah, she edits pictures of herself to look like a cat and posts it on Finnish 4chan. Because the unprofessionalism of things like this, it just screams to me. I don't like this type of thing, whether it's a man or a woman. I get it's a difficult job to act professional all the time, but my god, if you're going for Prime Minister, don't edit yourself as a cat girl. It's really off-putting and doesn't really give you a serious vibe that I think you should have as a Prime Minister. So that's nightmare number 2 over and done with. Let's go a bit closer to home and look at nightmare number 3. Nicola Sturgeon defends controversial school sex survey as kids watchdog call for census to be halted. Yes, the stereotype of nonces in Parliament really isn't being helped by Nicola Sturgeon here. Sturgeon has defended the controversial sex survey for kids despite a children's watchdog calling for it to be paused amid human rights concerns. Sturgeon said the health and well-being census, which asked pupils as young as 14 about intimate acts, was necessary to understand trends, and if you're wondering what these intimate acts include, one of them I believe includes anal penetration. Ms Sturgeon said 24 of Scotland's councils have decided to take part, but a quarter of the councils have refused to participate amid concerns from parents over the explicit information requested. And today, Scotland's Children Commissioner Bruce Adamson said ministers have put the brakes on the questionnaire over privacy fears, as pupils have to provide their student candidate number in the form. Oof. The First Minister insisted that surveys would stay confidential and said we shouldn't bury our heads in the sand to high school aged kids being exposed to sex in real life and online. Why are you so interested in the private life of kids, Ms Sturgeon? It seems really weird. So after a back and forth about privacy concerns because having your student number on this survey does allow you to be identified, Nicola said back, this is a voluntary survey. It is only for S4 and upwards, which is age 14 and upwards. Any parent can refuse to give consent, and of course, any young person can opt not to take part in the survey or to skip particular questions in the survey. But challenged on the questionnaire, Tory MSP Megan Gallagher highlighted sections asking pupils about their sexual experiences, such as if they'd engaged in intimate touching, over or under clothes, or had oral sex, vaginal or anal sex. Ms Gallagher added, First Minister, would you feel comfortable answering these questions? And Ms Sturgeon responded, we can choose to pretend that young people of this age group do not have the experiences the member has narrated, or is not exposed online in the digital world we live in. We can choose to pretend that young people, girls sometimes in particular, are not subjected to harassment and pressure around sexual matters. We can do that, we can refuse to ask the questions so that we don't know the answers. Or we can get the answers that then allow us to do better in supporting young people, to provide the advice and the information and the guidance to young people that supports and enables them to make positive, healthy choices for the future. Why are we constantly taking this away from parents? It's the parents' job to teach stuff about this. Because apparently, the government standard for sexual education is going up to a 14-year-old and saying, have you ever had anal sex? That is essentially what this survey is doing. I'm always surprised that a left-wing government in power in Scotland is trying to ask kids about anal sex and whether they've had it. Honestly, I think Sargon puts it best.
The left are pedos, the left are pedos, the left are pedos, pedo. That's all people should hear when they think of left-wing politics. And there's so many examples of this.
Another story to aptly add to that pile. So that was nightmare number 3, and now we get on to the biggest nightmare of them all. That of New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, who seems to be leading the world in COVID totalitarianism. And to think a year ago people were holding that country up as the virtue of liberty. But no, we see headlines such as this one. New Zealand health workers and teachers told no jab, no job. So you need a vaccination or you're not allowed to teach. Healthcare maybe makes slightly more sense, but teaching doesn't make sense. They're not risking kids, given it's a disease that overwhelmingly negatively affects older people rather than younger ones. But not only is there a no jab, no job policy, they also need vaccine passports, because the Prime Minister says the Cabinet has agreed to the use of vaccine certificates in the UK. The vaccine passport is likely to be digital COVID-19 vaccination certificates containing a QR code. A vaccine certificate is proof you have been vaccinated and is now common overseas, Ardern says. In certain countries that is true, but just because other people do something doesn't mean you should. Well, usually when we're all asked by our mothers if your friend were to jump off a cliff, would you too? Ardern's reply appears to be, yes, I would like to jump off this cliff into totalitarianism. Because there is a prize at the bottom when they land on a pile of mattresses that gives them unlimited power. And be careful with Ardern, because when she's in live interviews, she tends to slip up like in this clip.
Mind, so long as there's people who are eligible who haven't been vaccinated, we've got work to do. I don't think I'll ever be satisfied so long as there's someone who is eligible and hasn't been. And that's why I've said this, there's not going to be an endpoint to this vaccination program. Once we're rolling out boosters now, so we've got another wave of people that we need to make sure that we're protecting again. So those who were vaccinated 6 months ago, we really need them to come back, or we need to go to them.
Yes, according to Ardern, there is no end to this vaccination process in sight. It appears that it's just going to be endless. You don't get the 7th or 8th or 9th jab, you don't get your job. You can't participate in society, which is just ridiculous. I mean, we've had flu jabs for years all over the Western world that all the people take because they're more vulnerable to it. Completely voluntary and people take it, but although COVID-19 appears to be worse, the new variants, especially Omicron, appear to be more mild, at least for now. So see what Omicron does over the next few weeks or months. Hopefully it stays mild, and then these vaccine mandates and other totalitarian policies will hopefully be thrown out the door. I'm not having high hopes for that, because once you've got power, why would they get rid of it? But it appears to be, at least in the UK, people are getting very, very annoyed at our officials because of the whole thing with the Christmas parties last year, where the whole country was locked down and Downing Street had anywhere between 3 and 7 parties, completely breaking lockdown rules. So you'd hope as the variants get less and less deadly, there'd be less and less need for these sorts of things, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. I, again, don't hold high hopes. But this I wouldn't say is even a nightmare, as all the COVID totalitarianism, at the very least, has worldwide consensus on that, in the way that every country is talking about what New Zealand have gone ahead and done. But we come on to a slightly different issue, we're coming off the coof, so here is what the Times said today. New Zealand smoking ban, young to be barred from ever buying cigarettes. Government aims to make the country smoke-free within 4 years. Absolute insanity. That means if you're born after 2008, you will never legally be allowed to buy a cigarette, or I imagine tobacco of any kind. Mental. New Zealand will ban young people from ever being able to purchase tobacco under world-leading plans to make the country virtually smoke-free within 4 years. No one who is under the age of 14 today will ever be legally permitted to buy cigarettes in a drive to eradicate smoking from the country under new legislation to be introduced early next year. Each year, the legal smoking age, now 18, will be increased, with new age groups added to the ban list until the country is almost smoke-free. This is just a goldmine for anyone already in the tobacco black market, which I'm sure there will be. You're going to have an incredible amount of illegal tobacco coming into New Zealand now. And what are New Zealand really going to do a Prohibition-era America? Are they really going to try and break down these smoky speakeasies and be like, you're all under arrest? Is it really worth it? Because that just seems nuts to me. In the future, older generations will only be able to buy tobacco products with very low levels of nicotine, and far fewer shops will be able to sell tobacco products, and they will be asked by a load of kids outside, hey, can you please proxy buy for us? Though obviously not in those exact words. The government aims to cut the smoking rates to 5% or less by 2025. At present, it is more than double that, and far higher among New Zealand's indigenous Maori. Wait, it's only in the tens? Really? You're worried about around 10% of people having an unhealthy habit? Like, seriously, this isn't an issue. This is just, I've got power, I need to use it, because I feel good about myself. We want to make sure young people never start smoking, so we will make it an offence to sell or supply smoked tobacco products to new cohorts of young people. Aisha Verrell, the Associate Health Minister and infectious disease physician, said, "This is a historic day for the health of our people." Well, what if your people want to say, stuff it, we want to smoke? You're forcing 10 to 15% of the population to abide by your rules to kick a relatively unhealthy habit, because you're doing it in the name of public health. And I mean, I know it's really cringy to do something like this, but that was exactly what the Nazis said when they first started being totalitarian. It's all, oh, it's for the good of public health and things like that. Just reject it. Just especially for tobacco, just reject it. Let people smoke. It's their fault if they want to get into the unhealthy habit. Let them deal with it. Additional measures will be taken to encourage people to quit, including cutting the number of retailers permitted to sell cigarettes from about 8,000 at present to less than 500 in a nation of 5 million. There will be no compensation for the thousands of retailers expected to be forced out of business. Additionally, only products with very low nicotine levels will be available in future, and there will be further restrictions on already tightly regulated tobacco packaging to limit the appeal of smoking. Mental. You're forcing tobacconists and things like that. You're cutting their profits catastrophically, quite frankly, to the point where they'll be forced out of business. And your government regulations, you're just not going to compensate them for. Why? Oh, it's the good of public health. Instead of people buying your products, they should be spending that money on public health, I assume. So, you know, get stuffed. You were doing something perfectly legal yesterday. Well, today, I'm afraid you're going to have to lose all the money you would have made. Just basically 2 middle fingers up to the population there of not just the smokers, but also the people who supply to the smokers. Because mutual consent in a trade, apparently can't have that. Just can't have that. Why? Oh, public health. And a New Zealand system isn't even like the NHS. There is a basic government subsidy for healthcare, but it's basically people on private insurance, similar to that of Germany. So you can't even use nationalised healthcare as an excuse, for God's sake. My God, I have to read this whole article out because it gets even worse. So, smoking rates have been dropping in New Zealand, reaching 11.6% in 2018 compared to 18% the decade earlier. So, it's been going down. Why do we need these extra measures then? However, the rates for Maori and among New Zealand's high numbers of Pacific Islanders, those numbers are far higher. Smoking rates for Maori is almost 30% and 18% for those of Pacific Island descent. So New Zealand have said, oh, everything we've done so far to completely castrate the tobacco industry in New Zealand, it's worked well for the Europeans and people like that, the whiteys, if you will. But no, these goddamn minorities are getting in the way of our public health targets. We need to make sure we nanny state the crap out of these minorities because they can't make the good decisions on their own. And unironically, they say that. So, if nothing changes, it will be decades till Maori smoking rates fall below 5%, Veral said. She said eradicating smoking in the next 4 years was within reach. I believe it is. In fact, we're on track for the New Zealand European population. The issue is, though, if we don't change what we're doing, we won't make it for the Maori, and that's what the plan is really focused on. We've got to focus on these goddamn minorities that are causing problems for us. Health experts hailed the announcement, with Dr. Alistair Humphrey, chairman of the New Zealand Medical Association, saying it was a defining moment for respiratory health. However, the right-wing ACT New Zealand Party said the change would lead to a black market for tobacco with no standards or regulation that would put people at greater risk. If you're ever wondering what's turned me right-wing, fellow listeners, the reason is things like this. The left are just pie-in-the-sky stuff. It's just, we've got these great plans for utopia, we'll have smoking completely eradicated. And the right-wing, especially people like Thomas Sowell and people like that, they just came along, looked at all the data and went, wow, everything they're doing is just causing more issues. Same thing with communism, very far-left ideology. Whenever it's been implemented, it's been a massive problem. And that's putting it mildly. And of course, I'm not just saying that right-wingers are perfect in every way. No, we've had our problems on the right wing as well. But my God, especially in the current paradigm we're in, they seem to just be right on most things. And that's the way my mind works. What works? Not the left wing, so I'm not going to be a part of it. But anyway, that was the 4 nightmares. As you can see, it got progressively worse. Hopefully a white pill is that the idiots that say, oh, more women in charge will mean better societies. They see these stories and realise that, yes, men can be just as incompetent and stupid when in charge of a country as men. Pick people on merit, people. Please don't pick people just because they happen to have a wet hole. But as I say, that's everything I had for you today. So, as usual, thank you very much for watching. And until next time, goodbye.